If you were buying a home in Houston, there is one conversation that should happen before you ever fall in love with the floor plan. And most buyers are not having it until they are already under contract. That conversation is about flooding and flood insurance. And I want to walk you through exactly what you need to know because the questions are answerable. You just have to know where to look. I'm Marcela Amador, an agent, a builder, and an investor here in the Houston area. And today we are talking about the two questions I hear from Houston buyers more than almost any other. The first is, how much is flood insurance going to cost me? The second is, has this specific street flooded since Harvey? Hmm. Sometimes the latter is the first that they ask. Both questions have real answers, and by the end of this video, you will know how to find them. Let's start with the flood zones because this is where most buyers get confused. FEMA designates flood risk across Harris County using zone categories. The two you will encounter the most often are Zone AE and Zone X. AE is a high risk. Properties here have a 1% annual chance of flooding, which is what FEMA calls the 100-year floodplain. If you have a federally backed mortgage and your home is in Zone AE, flood insurance is required by law. Zone X is moderate to low risk, and flood insurance is not required. But here's what Harvey taught us. Tens of thousands of Zone X properties flooded in 2017 because Harvey was a rainfall event, not a riverine flood. FEMA maps are built around river and bayou overflows. They were never designated to predict 17 trillion gallons of rain falling in 4 days. So the zone does matter. It is just not the whole picture. Now, let's talk about the document that most buyers never asked for, the elevation certificate. This is a survey prepared by a licensed land surveyor that records exactly how high a home sits relative to FEMA's base flood elevation for that area. And for that matter, any home in or near a high-risk flood zone. This number is the single biggest factor in what you will actually pay for flood insurance. A home that sits above the base flood elevation can qualify for significantly lower premiums than a home at or below it. And the difference is not small. It can be the difference between a premium that fits comfortably in your budget and one that changes the math on the entire purchase. Newer construction is usually built to current elevation standards and comes with a certificate from the builder. Older homes often do not have one, but you can order one during your option period, and the cost is typically a few $100s. That is one of the best investments you can make in the due diligence process. Let me put this in terms of the neighborhoods. I know some of you are looking in the Heights. You have a mix of older bungalows and newer construction throughout the 77008 and 77009 zip codes. Proximity to White Oak Bayou varies significantly block to block, which means two homes on different streets can have entirely different flood profiles. That is exactly why you look at the specific property and not just the general neighborhood. In EaDo, East Downtown, around the 77003 zip code, you have a lot of new development built on land that sits near the Buffalo Bayou. Many of those newer builds were constructed post-Harvey with updated elevation standards, but the site matters. You want to know what the finished floor elevation is relative to the street and relative to FEMA's benchmark. Denver Harbor, on the other hand, out in East Houston near 77011, 77020 zip code, and Hunting Bayou is a neighborhood where drainage infrastructure and bayou improvements are especially worth researching. Through Harris County Flood Control, the point is not to avoid any of these areas. It is to ask the right questions for the specific property. So how do you check flood history? Start with the Texas seller's disclosure. Sellers in Texas are legally required to disclose known flooding and any prior insurance claims on the property. Read it carefully and ask follow-up questions. Then go to the Harris County Flood Education Mapping tool. I will link it below, which lets you search any address and see historical flood data layered over a map. And check the Harris County Flood Control District's website for information on bayou improvement projects. near the home because a lot of mitigation work has happened since Harvey and it matters. Here is the frame I give every buyer I work with in Houston. It is not a question of whether water pools on a street after heavy rain. It is a question of how fast it drains. And the answer to that comes from the drainage infrastructure, the bayou capacity, the home's elevation, and whether the area has seen improvement since 2017. All of that is knowable. None of it requires guessing. If you are looking at a home in Houston and you want a clear road on what the flood picture actually looks like for that property before you make an offer, reach out to me directly. DM me on Instagram at Marcela Amador Realtor, or if call me, text me 832-701-4181. I work in these neighborhoods and I know what questions to ask. Subscribe to this channel for more Houston real estate content every week. And I will see you in the next video.